Cleveland Heap, the landlord of a building in Philadelphia, is helping Mr. Latore's family get rid of a bug in their sink. After the job, he takes Mr. Farber, a new tenant and film critic, to his apartment and on the way, meets the technician who cleans the building's swimming pool. He warns him that the pool is dirty, but Heap doesn't believe him because it's closed at night. However, the guy pulls out a small lock of hair from inside the filter, which appears to be a woman's hair. Heap decides to investigate, but first he takes Mr. Farber to his apartment. On the way, he introduces him to his neighbors: Reggie, a guy who knits only one arm, Mr. Dury and his son Joey, Mr. Leeds, an ex-military man who lives alone, and Mrs. Bell, a woman who is usually surrounded by butterflies. When evening comes, the landlord goes back to his house to rest, until he hears a noise coming from the pool. When he goes out to have a look, he sees a small necklace floating in the water and puts it on one of the benches. Then a beautiful young woman jumps out of the pool to get the necklace and Heap tells her to get out, but she dives back in. Seconds pass and there is no sign of the girl, which makes the landlord think that the young woman has drowned. Fearing that she is in danger, the landlord jumps into the pool to save the girl, but she has mysteriously disappeared. He then gets out of the pool, but ends up slipping on the water and hitting his head on the floor, knocking himself unconscious. Minutes later, he wakes up in his apartment to a mysterious young woman sitting on the sofa who introduces herself as Story. She says she is a NYMPH and that she has come from an unknown place, called only the Blue World. Without understanding what she's saying, Heap asks the girl to go home. But Story can't leave because a dark creature is after her. Taking pity on the girl, Heap lets her spend the night in his apartment, but as soon as she falls asleep, he takes her in his arms and sets off in search of her home. However, as soon as he passes the pool area, he finds himself facing a wolf with fur that looks like it's made of grass. The creature looks at them menacingly and, on seeing it, Story screams in despair and Heap runs with her back to her apartment. The next morning, the landlord calls the police to investigate the wolf, but the officer tells him that there are no wolves around Philadelphia. Nevertheless, Heap decides to investigate the wolf and the mysterious girl on his own and asks his neighbor, young Sue, what a NYMPH is. This word reminds her of an old children's story that her mother, Mrs. Choi, used to tell her when she was a child. The two then go looking for the woman who, despite being grumpy, tells them that NYMPH means sea nymph, a being who is looking for a human known as a receiver. If she succeeds, a great eagle will take her back to her home and the chosen human will receive a message that could change the world. After hearing everything, Heap goes to meet Story and asks her who she is looking for. The girl has no idea who he is, only that she can't go home until she finds him. The landlord then decides to look for the writer among the tenants, but none of them has written anything recently, not even the film critic, Mr. Farber. Heap is already hopeless, until young Sue calls him from the window and says she's discovered more details about the story. According to her mother, the nymphs are chased by creatures known as scrunts, grass-covered wolves, who attack them when they are out of the sea. Seeing that it's the same creature he found by the pool, Heap rushes to find the receiver, but to no avail. The day is almost over and the landlord continues to help the tenants, until he meets one of them, called Vic, alongside his sister, Anna. The guy asks him to fix the lamp in his room, as he needs light to continue writing his book. On hearing this, Heap suspects that he is the person Story is looking for and decides to do the job to find out more. Inside the room, he finds an unfinished script on Vic's desk, but when he reads the title, he discovers that it's actually a recipe book. Disappointed, he asks Vic about the script, but he tells him it's just a working title for a story about how to solve the world's problems. This only increases his suspicions that he is Story's receiver and Heap takes him to his apartment to introduce him to the mysterious girl. When he gets there, he finds Story with his diary, having read every page and discovered the truth about Heap. According to the diary, he was once a renowned doctor, but lost his purpose in life when his wife and son were eliminated by a criminal. Now he lives alone and without prospects, working as an apartment manager. The memory of the past makes Heap change the subject and he introduces Vic to Story, saying that he could be the receiver. As soon as he meets the young nymph, Vic has a strange feeling, as if the two of them have a connection that he can't explain. The young man then leaves and Story, who confirms that he is the receiver, tells him that her mission has been accomplished and she must go home. Although he sympathizes with the girl, Heap respects her decision and the two of them go to the pool, but Story tells him that she needs to be alone, otherwise the eagle won't appear. Heap then goes to the stairs of the apartments to help the other neighbors, when he hears a noise coming from the second floor. He runs to see what's happened and finds Story, frightened and with her legs injured by an animal's claws. The landlord is confused, as he thought Story would be taken back home, but instead she is attacked by a scrunt. Seconds later, through the window in the door, The creature comes through and tries to attack the girl, but Heap saves her and takes her to Vic and Anna's apartment. The two of them leave her resting in the room, but Heap notices that Story isn't feeling well. He then runs to Young Sue's apartment and asks for more information about Story, but instead finds her grumpy mother. After much insistence, the woman tells him that the Scrunts have a poison in their claws that can eliminate the nymphs. The only way to heal the wound is with a special mud, known as Ki, which comes from the place where the nymphs were born. He then jumps into the pool and, inside the drain, sees a secret passage that leads to Story's hideout. Inside, he finds several lost objects from the neighbors that the girl had kept in her room, and along with them, he finds Ki. On leaving the pool, Heap meets Young Sue again, who has more to tell him about the history of the nymphs. She discovered that the Scrunts will attack nymphs, even in the presence of the Tartutic, if they find out that they are of royal lineage. This means that Story is destined to be a queen of the oceans and has therefore become an even bigger target for the huge wolves. The threat is greater than Heap imagined, and he rushes to find Story and give her the key to heal her wounds. With the young nymph now recovered, the two tell Vic and Anna the whole truth, and, even though it sounds like a fantasy tale, they believe the story. Vic even says that, on seeing Story, he finally found his motivation to write his cookbook. Story then reveals that, in the future, the ideas written by Vic will be discovered by a boy, and thanks to them, he will become a leader capable of guiding humanity on a better path. Even with so many revelations, Heap believes that there is more to this story than has been told and goes to Young Sue's house to find out more details. However, the young woman says that her mother only likes to tell stories to children, and the only way to convince her to talk more is if he acts like one. With no choice, the man goes to their house and starts behaving like a child, eager to hear a bedtime story. As bizarre as this is, the old woman is encouraged by his behavior and tells him the whole story about the sea nymphs. When Heap finds out, he goes back to the apartment and talks to Story to confirm that the legend is true. However, the girl is hiding in the shower and can't reveal the secrets of the blue world, so Anna proposes that Story just confirms whether something is right or wrong, using sign language. The young girl accepts, and Heap begins to tell her what he has discovered through Young Sue and her mother. The first part of the legend tells of a group of humans who don't know each other, but possess powers capable of helping the nymph return home. Anna conveys this message, and with a gesture, Story confirms that it's all true. The second part talks about the classification of these humans, with one of them being the Guardian, the one who will protect the nymph from any threat. The second, called the Interpreter, has the gift of finding the true meaning of things through the ordinary and mundane. In addition, the legend talks about a third group, known as the Gremio, who with their hands will be able to save the nymph in times of need. Story confirms it once again and says she believes Heap is her guardian. However, she doesn't know who the Interpreter is, nor does she know the group that forms the guild, which only makes things more difficult. Finally, Heap asks about the healer, a person capable of using the goodness in their heart to heal any wound. Unfortunately, Story doesn't know who they might be either, but says that they is usually surrounded by butterflies. Heap immediately remembers Mrs. Bell and suspects that she is the healer, but has no idea who the Interpreter or the guild is. To make matters worse, the young woman warns her that she only has one more day to be taken back by the eagle, otherwise she will never return to her world. Heap then decides to look among the locals for those who will help him in this mission, and his first step is to talk to Mr. Farber. As he is a film critic, Heap believes that he will be able to unveil the central characters of the story through their characteristics. He goes to Mr. Farber's apartment and asks how he would find an interpreter and a guild in a film script. With an air of superiority, the guy says that for the former, he will need to look for someone who does something ordinary, but who demonstrates skill in deciphering words and symbols. For the second, he should look for a group of people who are always together, talking about seemingly trivial matters. Following these tips, Heap remembers Mr. Dury, as he is always doing crossword puzzles together with Joey. Next, he talks to Smoker, an unassuming guy who is always with a group of friends, hanging out and talking about random subjects. Finally, he calls Mrs. Bell and invites everyone to meet Story at Vic and Anna's apartment. With everyone gathered, Heap asks Mr. Dury to try to interpret, through wordplay, how they can send Story back to her world. Even though he's skeptical about the whole thing, he tries to look up keywords and finds something about a party, sounds and scheme. As a result, Mr. Dury deduces that, next night, they should hold a party to distract Scrunt. However, since no one but the chosen group of humans can see her leave with the eagle, they need to hire a band to keep the guests distracted. Everyone finds this interpretation convincing and decides to follow the plan the following night, which will be Story's last chance to return to her world. As they prepare for this moment, Heap tells Story that it would be better to confront Scrunt, to make sure he doesn't attack her again. The young woman accepts, but warns him that in order to find the creature, he must use a mirror, as it will reflect the Skrunt's eyes in the grass. Heap decides to do this and uses a communicator to talk to Story, while directing the mirror towards the grass. Shortly afterwards, he meets Skrunt's eyes and Story tells him to say the phrase Nef Ra Mora, which is a command to challenge the monster to a fight. Heap obeys and suddenly, the huge wolf begins to rise from the grass, about to attack. Story warns him that the Guardian has the ability to ward off Skrunts by looking them in the eye. The trustee tries to do this, but it's no use and the creature gets closer and closer. Heap then runs away and Story fears the worst will happen, but fortunately, Mr. Farber appears, making the Skrunt hide back in the grass. Afterwards, Heap returns to the apartment and tells Story that he was unable to drive the creature away, indicating that he may not be the Guardian. Even so, they decide to go ahead with the party, as they need to get the young nymph back to her world anyway. The next day, Vic goes to see Story to find out about his future and the prediction she made about his cookbook. According to Story, the book will only be found years later, by a boy who will become a great world leader. However, she didn't mention that the two would meet in the future and he fears that his book will only be discovered when he is no longer alive. To his fear, she warns him that he will lose his life because of the things he has written in his book. However, his gesture will inspire future generations and guide humanity to its salvation. Despite this tragic future, he asks Story not to tell his sister and continues writing his book. Finally, the night of the party arrives and everyone is gathered around the pool where it all began. Before leaving, Story tells Heap that she knows her future, but instead of listening, he asks her to tell him what will happen when she returns to the blue world. The young woman only knows what she has been told, that the world will align and everyone will follow the right path. However, she fears that without the Tartunic's presence, the Skrunt will prevent her from leaving and all will be lost. Heap tries to console her, asking her not to lose hope and that she will soon be taken back by the Great Eagle. The two then head to the pool, with the rest of the group keeping watch to prevent anything bad happening to Story. Anna pulls a makeup mirror out of her pocket and uses it to keep an eye on the lawn, but one of the guests knocks it to the ground, breaking the mirror. Things only get worse when Smoker tries to contact the band to start the show, only to realize that the communicator is out of battery. Because of these failures, the group ends up leaving Story defenseless and, seeing the opportunity, the Skrunt attacks her and pulls her towards the lawn. Luckily, Heap sees everything and manages to reach the young woman before it's too late, but finds her unconscious and seriously injured. The whole group gets together to get her to safety and calls on Mrs. Bell to use her power as a healer. However, nothing happens and Heap asks Mr. Dury to find an answer in his word game. However, he finds nothing useful and begins to wonder if he and the rest of the group are really the chosen ones according to legend. He goes on to say that it may all have just been a misinterpretation and that the answer lies elsewhere. Heap is disappointed by this and realizes that he only followed the understanding of the film critic, Mr. Farber, because he judged everything with such authority that he seemed to be right. Meanwhile, the guy leaves the party and looks for the bathroom, only to find Skrunt standing in front of him. Mr. Farber thinks it's just a dog, but when he looks closer, he realizes it's a monstrous creature, as if it had come from a horror movie. The subject tries to rationalize the situation, saying that, just like in the cinema, the creature will let him go because this is a film for the whole family. However, as the monster gets closer, he realizes that the outcome will be different. Back with the group, Heap despairs when he sees that Story is getting weaker and weaker. They then try to think of who might actually be the chosen ones, starting with the interpreter, the one who sees the message through the mundane. At that moment, Mr. Dury realizes that only someone specific would be able to find the greatest meaning in something as ordinary as a children's story, namely a child. That child is none other than his son, Joey, who has always helped him with crossword puzzles and only he can unravel the truth. This soon proves to be true and in front of everyone, the young man manages to find the answer to take Story back to her world. He interprets that the guild is a group of 7 sisters and they must give energy to the healer, with everything being seen by 2 witnesses. These witnesses must be a man of respectable character and another who has nothing to hide. Hearing all this, Heap remembers Mr. Latore and his 5 daughters, and goes to his apartment to ask for their help. He then summons young Soon and Anna to be the last 2 sisters to make up the guild. Finally, it's the turn of the 2 good-natured guys, who are Mr. Leeds, a respectable man, and Mr. Bubchik, a guy with a habit of being too sincere. With everyone gathered around, Mrs. Bell tries to bring the young nymph back, but nothing happens. Faced with yet another failure, everyone around begins to believe that the whole story is absurd and the best thing to do is to take the girl to hospital. However, Joey appears and says that he has made a mistake in the story. In reality, it's not a healer, but but a healer who is responsible for saving the nymph, and that the only one capable of taking on this task is Heap. He doesn't believe it at first, but everyone around him convinces him that only he can save Story. Having been a doctor in the past, Heap decides to help the young nymph, and, kneeling with her in his arms and with everyone putting their hands around him, he asks the girl to wake up. Amid sadness and guilt, Heap apologizes for not being able to save her, just as he couldn't save his family. He takes the opportunity to say how much he loves his wife and son and how much he misses them, but before he can meet them again, he needs to help this young woman return home. Thanks to his words, Story's wounds begin to heal and the girl finally awakens in front of everyone. The group is happy about this, but they need to hurry because the Great Eagle is about to arrive. The party guests continue around the pool, but by some miracle, heavy rain begins to fall and everyone enters the apartment. Also, seeing that all the guests are inside the building, the band starts playing, keeping everyone distracted by the music. Story, along with Heap and the other chosen ones, wait for the eagle, until they come across the return of the Scrunt. He approaches to attack Story, but Heap is willing to defend her at any price. To his surprise, the creature stands still, unresponsive and staring at someone nearby. Looking back, Heap realizes that Reggie is staring at the Scrunt and deduces that he is the true guardian of the legend. Even though he doesn't understand what's going on, Reggie grabs a pool net and drives the wolf away towards the lawn. Then the Tartunic finally appear, attack the wolf and drive it back into the darkness of the forest. Everything goes according to legend and finally, the Great Eagle appears to take Story back to her home. Before leaving, Heap thanks her for helping him find a new reason to live and then hands her over to the huge bird, which takes off into the skies. Finally, Story will return to her world, to become queen of the blue world and with her mission on Earth accomplished. Everyone watches her go, sad to say goodbye, but also feeling like better people, thanks to the incredible experience they had with the lady in the water. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.